Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, HollywoodShono here, about to give you another Injustice Gods Among Us video. And in this video we talk about buffing bad cards and which cards I deem are actually useless in today's meta. Now, as you guys know, there are a couple cards that actually broke the meta and actually changed the way that you play the game. Obviously, a lot of good players are using Injustice 2 Superman. Killer Frost Prime is also one of the best cards in the game because of dampening power and the significance that it actually has on your gameplay, because when you have 50% less power, combinations that normally would work, like for example, the Blackest Night team gets completely shut down when you don't have the power in order to do attack. So which cards, in my opinion, are considered bad? Well, as you guys know, Aquaman is a pretty bad card, and the reason that he's a bad card is basically the stats. You can compare him with Injustice 2 Aquaman that has 1,400 damage and health. And a lot of people aren't even using Injustice 2 Aquaman, even with those type of stats. So to make this Aquaman competitive, I think having around 1,200 damage, 1,400 health might be usable. You don't really want too much with the armies of Atlantis, because if you throw a lot of power generation on Aquaman, you can basically just spam this outright, and it would just make Aquaman super annoying, and that would be the meta. So you want to make it somewhere competitive. Even, say, 1,200 damage and 1,200 health probably would still see some play, but it would probably still be countered out by Killer Frost. Now, that also leads the second Aquaman, who has one of the passives that can actually power drain Static and Lobo. I think there's another one in there as well that can't be power drained. I think it's Red Lantern Hal Jordan. This is one way that you can actually power drain by using the Watery Grave. Now, Aquaman also suffers from the fact that he just has no damage. While he does have a decent amount of health, I believe he has like 1050 base. The fact that he only has like 750 or 800 damage makes him literally unplayable, even though he has a fun passive. Now, if power generation was like before patch 2.0 and regenerated at the same point, he would probably actually see a little bit of play just for the power draining mechanics. But, rip in peace, that is not the case. Now, a card that in my opinion has been horrible for days has been Bane, as he's the only starter card that has less than 750 attack. I think he has like 650, even though he has 1,050 damage. Now, while they changed the passive, in my opinion, I really think that instead of once per match, this needs to be a permanent effect. When Bane is below 40% health, he does 25% more damage, and all basic attacks will be critical hits. Now, as we know, it is not just basic attacks, it's all hits are critical hits. But I really think that Bane needs a damage boost. I think that if they actually put the damage to compare with the health and made the buff permanent, you would actually see a little bit of play from Bane, although he probably needs a little bit more health. Like, I think he needs like 1,100 damage, 1,400 health to actually be considered playable. And like I said, Venom Tank needs to be a permanent effect when he's under that much health. With all the healing mechanics, I don't think it's broken. I think it would actually be fine. So that also leads to Arkham Origins Bane. While the card is not necessarily as bad, I think that he could use a little bit of a damage boost, even though he has a much better light attack, and he's a lot more playable compared to all the other Banes. He could use a little bit of a damage buff. Now, I really like the passive for Arkham Origins Bane, and some people could argue it, but keep in mind, if you're using an all Arkham team, you're not doing it right, because obviously Killer Frost is so mandatory, and even with the reduced stats that Killer Frost has and the slow attacks that she has, just having her on your team, along with her overpowered Black Ice, could sue you the game in most cases. Now, Luchador Bane, in my opinion, this is a great card. Upon tagging, Bane has a chance to stun his opponent and receives a 25% boost to all damage for 4 seconds. Now, as we know, Luchador Bane is not a tanky card, but this is an example of a card that works just fine. Leave it alone. Batgirl is also another case because 1 bar of power is such a powerful mechanic in the game. For example, Aries can then use an unblockable Godsmack, and if it doesn't knock the opponent out, will carry on for all opponents for 10 seconds. So Aries is one of those cards that you kind of just have in the sidelines and just do a lot of damage, and even if you only use them like that, Aries is fine. Cassandra Cain Batgirl, in my opinion, is okay, and you do see her in multiplayer a little bit. I think the card is fine the way it is. If anything, a little bit more health might do the trick for Cassandra Cain Batgirl, but I think the card is fine the way it is. I don't think it needs any changes. You can synergize with 600 Wonder Woman and Killer Frost, and that would be a really powerful team. So Batman, in my opinion, while he does have a really cool passive that teammates do 25% more damage, you will see Batman in a lot of my Elite 7 videos because along with animated Harley Quinn, unless you're using 600 Wonder Woman, and even if you're not using 600 Wonder Woman, you can take out animated Harley Quinn, but 25% damage is the second strongest damage buff, and for the males, it is the strongest damage buff. So how could you fix Batman? You could give him the same treatment as Blackest Night Batman. Give him about 1,300 damage, and even the 1050 health would be acceptable, and I think he would see a lot more play than he does. But otherwise, great card. Before patch 2.0, he was one of my favorite cards just for the damage buff, because that would allow you to defeat opponents you normally could not. So there isn't a whole lot. I think Arkham Origins Batman is fine the way he is. You don't need overly broken cards that you don't get out of challenges. So leave Arkham Origins Batman alone. He's still super powerful until you can get Arkham Knight Batman, who in my opinion is a direct upgrade unless you are not used to his heavy attack. Now Batman Beyond does have one of the best multiplayer passes in the game. And the reason for that is what's going to kill you in multiplayer is stun mechanics. So the fact that Batman Beyond is immune to stun makes him a very underrated card and somebody that you should give a try out. Now, Batman Beyond is a free card, and that's one of the reasons that I feel he does not need a buff. However, to actually be useful in the long run, you either have to fully augment him or you have to try and find a way to buff his stats. And I think where he could get the buff is in the health department. I think his damage is okay, as he has like, I think 900 or somewhere in that range. He did get a buff, so I don't know. I think that Batman Beyond, consider how easy he is to get, he's actually easier to get than Prison Superman. I think the card is fine the way it is, especially because you can use that passive to your advantage. Now, I like the changes that they made to Blackest Night Batman. He used to be 1,000 damage, 900 health. They buffed it to 1,250 and 1,000 health, and actually give him a passive that actually means something, because who actually plays between midnight and 6 a.m.? Not a whole lot of people. Now, animated Batman Beyond, I actually think is fine the way he is. If anything, they should give him a little bit more health, but I really like the card. Give him a try if you haven't. I never actually played with the card until they repeated the Heroes Gauntlet, which I think was like patch 2.8 or something like that, back in June. So, great card, definitely worth using. Dawn of Justice Batman, leave him alone. I think he's fine the way he is. And Surgency Batman is a card you can buy for credit, so I would argue that he does not need a buff, but I think evening out the attack and health at 1050 would make him playable. Especially because you can do more damage when the opponent is stunned, so you can load up with basic damage gear, purposely like battering or stun with somebody else, and then you just obliterate them with basic damage. You can do it like that. Red Sun Batman, in my opinion, probably has the third or fourth best passive on the Red Sun teams. Obviously, he can get overshadowed by Red Sun Superman, which allows you to actually do basic damage. However, the 50% chance of unblockable special ones would be good if Red Sun Green Lantern was not in the equation. So because of that, you can't use it. Now, Kendak Black Adam, in my opinion, isn't the most powerful card, but I think he's fine the way he is. If you use Rashomon Scimitar, your light combos drain a half bar of power. I really feel that he should power drain even if the opponent blocks, because why would Nightwing and Lex Luthor continuously power drain, even Green Arrow, except for Silver power drain? Now, Regime Black Adam is a cheap card. He did receive a buff and a really powerful buff to his passive. When Black Adam tags in, he gains a shield that will damage the opponent if Black Adam is hit. While the aura is active, any special used against him will have double damage reflected back at the attacker. If Regime Black Adam had 1,500 damage like in Justice 2 Superman, I could see him actually getting quite a bit of play, because a lot of people can just throw 3-piece Fourth World on Black Adam and he can gain so much health. So, yeah, really good card if he had more health. I think that's all you need to do. Amikami Catwoman is a horrible card because the passive only works 25% of the time. The power drain effect is really weak. The bleed effect is not that noticeable. I think the bleed damage over time should be like 1% health a second. I think that would make it a little bit better. Why does Apocalypse Darkseid's passive do so much more damage? It actually does 15% of your total damage. So a normal Darkseid can do ridiculous damage with his bleed effects and even the life drain effects if you use basic damage. So Amikami Catwoman, good design card, horrible passive. It needs to get buffed. Arkham Knight Catwoman is perfectly fine the way she is. You can get ridiculous damage when you use Batman Returns Catwoman and 600 Wonder Woman. Obviously, in the current state, Batman Returns Catwoman is a very crappy card, even though you can buy it for credits. I think the card could definitely use a buff. Batman Returns Catwoman does have a really cool passive, even though I think the damage over time is not that well. I think there's a lot of broken mechanics with this. I think that if it worked with the Ibistic, if it worked with the LexCorp helmet, if it worked with the League of Assassins blade, if it worked with a lot of other effects, like even Scorpion's dot damage from his base attacks, I think the card would be a lot better. Even with like Martian Manhunter's mental damage, with Zatanna's burn damage, other things like that. If this actually worked the way it intended, if, say, Batman Returns Catwoman had a lot more health, like, say, 1300, even if you left the damage alone, I think the card would see a lot more play than it does now. But you do see it on the occasional Arkham Knight Catwoman team. The problem is the team is usually offensive and an easy kill, so Batman Returns Catwoman could use a lot more health. Now, in the case of Teen Titans Cyborg, the Reconstruction is a underrated passive because you do get a lot of value out of it when you're playing with cards like Injustice 2 Superman and Blackest Night Martian Manhunter. You can get a lot of value from this. The problem is the card is too weak. I believe it has like 700 or 750 damage, and it could use a lot more. I think if it had like 1200 damage, it would definitely see a lot more play than it does now. So all you really have to do with Teen Titans Cyborg, buff the damage. Now Darkseid Prime is one of those cards. He used to be one of the only cards that was stronger than Red Sun Superman. Unfortunately, Apocalypse Darkseid is better in every single way. And one of the weakest things for Fires of Apocalypse is the fact that if it's blocked, it literally does no damage. Now, I really think that because of the cool mechanics with the damage over time fire ability, I think that one way that you could buff Darkseid is that if the attack is not blocked, the opponent cannot tag in, but I really would like to see the burn damage just applied in general. If you apply that buff, you don't even need to change his stats. You can just use a Fires of Apocalypse. The opponent cannot tag out, and a lot of his health will burn away. I think that's the only change you really need to use for Darkseid, and he would see a lot more play. Apocalypse Darkseid, a really good card. Suicide Squad Deadshot, a really good card. He's obviously he's kind of like Blackest Night Batman. He can't take damage, but he can dish out a lot. I really like the card. So, Arkham Origins Deathstroke, I think is fine the way he is. Red Sun Deathstroke, however, could use a major buff because out of all 6 Red Sun characters, his passive is the worst. Now, while I would like to see more speed mechanics because it would make cards like Solomon Grundy and Lobo actually usable, unfortunately, there is no gear that actually gives you a speed buff. Now, could the speed buff be broken on MetaHuman the Flash? You betcha. But you could put it as a personal stat for Solomon Grundy, change out the unblockable into a speed buff, and I don't think that people would complain about it. I think Doomsday with the unblockable effect is cool, but Solomon Grundy could definitely use a speed mechanic for kind of like Seth Rollins. You use a special with his gear and you get more speed. I think something like that could make the card see a little bit of play, but how could you fix Red Sun Deathstroke? Easy. 1300 damage, 1100 health. Red Sun Deathstroke would actually see play even in the Red Sun team. So Red Sun Deathstroke needs a buff badly. Doomsday, I think, is fine the way he is because his passive is so strong. Doomsday's passive, for each knockout that Doomsday deals, he gains 50% health. Because of this, you can accept the 850 damage, 1050 health card. He is actually the second best card that you can buy starting out, and before Wave 8 of Survival, Doomsday is one of the best cards to use outside of Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight Batman. So Blackest Night Doomsday, in my opinion, is fine the way he is. Even Containment Doomsday, I don't feel needs a buff because he's one of those cards where if you augment him,
Doomsday.
Containment Doomsday is really cool because 3 times per match in the face of certain defeat, and this is one of the cards I wish I had augmented because I really want to test out if the card actually sucks in survival or if he's a good card with Raven who can swap health. considering the fact that this guy could actually revive 3 times and gain power, which means that you can actually fuel your specials in that way, I honestly don't think Containment Doomsday needs a buff. While he can be an easy kill, especially when you fight him in Survivor, in multiplayer, obviously, he's not a big threat. However, Countless Death's a really good special too. So I don't feel that Containment Doomsday actually needs a buff, and if he does, 100 or 200 damage should do the trick, and he'd see a lot more play. But I really like the design of Containment Doomsday. Now, Man of Steel General Zod, however, 800 damage, 1200 health, and this is kind of like a gimped out Red Sun Green Lantern passive. So, how do you fix Man of Steel General Zod? Make his damage comparable to his health, and he'll actually see play. And Fallen General only hits 1 opponent, even if the first hit knocks him out. So, a couple things they could do to actually change that card. Now, Green Arrow obviously falls. You know, it's really good to see a Arrow Green Arrow. I think it had like 950 damage, 850 health. Random Arrow is really cool because he can trigger a power drain. Actually, no, he can't trigger a power drain. He can trigger a freeze. I'm thinking of Martian Manhunter. He can trigger a freeze that allows for unblockable specials. Now, back in the day, Silver Green Arrow actually had a purpose. The freeze actually did double damage. And there's only a few mechanics that have that. Prime Superman has the freeze. I don't know why they changed it, but I guess they felt it was broken and felt they needed to take the double damage out. While Arrow Green Arrow, if that mechanic was still in the game, would actually see a lot of play to this day, because it's hard to pull off the combo enders from Green Arrow. And how you would actually buff Arrow Green Arrow? Well, 1200 damage and 1100 health, and I think he would be fine, especially because you can purchase him. Canary's Kiss is a pretty cool ability. So yeah, Green Arrow just needs a little bit more, and I think he'd be fine. John Stewart Green Lantern used to be one of the most broken cards to use with Red Lantern Hal Jordan, because he could do an infinite loop of Beware My Powers. I think he actually get off like 50. So a lot of people use that to actually get to Wave 16 of Survivor and actually beat it because of Red Lantern Hal Jordan. Well, NetherRealm thought that was too powerful. Now, I really like this passive ability because when Green Lantern or teammate reaches 20% health, a barrier appears, making that character invulnerable for 4 seconds. It's going to appear once per character per match. So that's a really cool passive. The problem with John Stewart Green Lantern is, unless you're dealing with him in Survivor, which is super annoying, the card is really weak. I think he has like 750 damage and 1,000 health or something like that, which is pretty ridiculous. I think that 1,000 damage, 1,400 health, and you might see John Stewart Green Lantern a little bit more in a defensive role. So yeah, that would be pretty cool. Now, Red Sun Green Lantern, if he did not have the Red Sun Energy Armor, would be a horrible card. But because of this, this is what allows Red Sun Superman and Red Sun Wonder Woman to shine in multiplayer, because you can use the 75% basic damage and 45% power generation to actually counter Killer Frost, who is super annoying, especially if you put the League of Assassins, the Depth Knives, and the Ibis-Stick on either Red Sun Wonder Woman or Red Sun Superman. I don't like it on Green Lantern. I actually started using the Scarecrow mask kind of as a block power generator. So, like example, if you're dealing with a Dawn of Justice or an Arkham Knight Batman with Fourth World, you can just put Green Lantern in, block attacks, and he'll get a ridiculous amount of power. Try it sometime. But because of the immunity to stun and crit, it's one of the best defensive tools for multiplayer, and that's why I think Red Sun Green Lantern is fine the way he is. But if they ever change the passive, I definitely think he needs a damage buff to at least be like 1,000 damage, and then the card would be fine. But Red Sun Green Lantern is the most defensive Red Sun card in the game, and I think he has the most defensive passive in the game. So Red Lantern Hal Jordan unfortunately cannot be healed. Special attacks and super moves use health instead of power. Red Lantern Jordan cannot be healed. I think there's a better mechanic they could use for this. Because the Beware My Power takes out about a third of his health, I think that when other characters heal Red Lantern Hal Jordan, for example, Blackest Night Martian Manhunter, I think his heal should be allowed. And I think 50% of like team heal should be allowed too. But I think Fourth World and LexCorp need to continue to not work. So basically, just stop regens from working and the card would be fine. And stop like direct heals from working. Have other people's heals, like for example, Harley Quinn, Blackest Night, Martian Manhunter. I think those heal work. And you might see some play from this guy again. But I think the way he is, the card is useless. They nerfed Rage of Atrocious into the ground, so the only saving grace for using the card is gone. Rage of Atrocious used to do a ridiculous amount of dark dot damage, just like the Fires of Apocalypse from Darkseid. So it's really unfortunate, but what can you do? Animated Harley Quinn obviously is a weak card by herself, but she gives a considerable buff to everybody else. Harley and her teammates receive 20% damage and power generation, 40% for Joker characters. So if you ever see the Killing Joke Joker get a buff, and trust me, he needs a buff, this card could be ridiculous. But I think the card is fine the way it is because Animated Harley Quinn has a really good passive. It only gets trumped by 600 Wonder Woman, but I think the card is fine the way it is. A really good design card. Now, Arkham Harley Quinn has received a lot of buffs. The problem is this Harley Quinn has the slowest attacks out of any Harley Quinn other than Bronze Harley Quinn. I really like what they did with Suicide Squad Harley Quinn, how they gave her Arkham Knight Harley Quinn's heavy attack and Insurgency Harley Quinn's light attack. So, if they made that change to this card, I think it would be okay, considering the ability to get her out of the Arkham pack. And the passive is really strong. The problem is when you use Arkham Harley Quinn over, say, Arkham Origins Bane, you lose so much in stats that it's not even worth it. Like, you could use Arkham Origins Batman, Arkham Origins, or Arkham Knight Batman, and this card, and it would still be worse than using Arkham Origins Bane because Harley Quinn is just a horrible card, mostly because she's just too slow and unusable. I think that if she had the attacks that Suicide Squad Harley Quinn does, the card would go from garbage to actually usable. So, change her attacks, and I think she'd be fine. Arkham Knight Harley Quinn also has a really cool passive, because when the enemy tags in, Harley may perform a surprise attack if she is tagged out. A lot of people used to combine this with Antimatter Sinestro. When the opponent would get forced out, there would be a chance that Arkham Knight Harley Quinn would come in and also do damage on top of that. And then if the Joker is knocked out on Harley's team, she gains full power. If this was on Suicide Squad Harley Quinn, it would be considered busted and overpowered. But because it's on Arkham Knight Harley Quinn, I think it's acceptable because most other Jokers suck. You could also use Arkham Origins the Joker, but in my opinion, I don't think he's good enough. So, Suicide Squad Harley Quinn, fine the way she is. Blackest Night Hawkgirl, I think, is fine the way she is. It's a pretty well-rounded card for the meta, and her passive is just really cool. Now, Hawkgirl did receive a buff to the passive. Hawkgirl and her team can tag in and out more quickly, 4 seconds faster tag cooldown. When Hawkgirl switches out or in, the enemy is snared and cannot switch for 5 seconds. This is really important when you're using dot attacks on somebody else, because you can let the dots pretty much fully tick away. So, like, for example, if you're using, let's say, Hawkgirl, Regime Black Adam, and somebody else with a cool tag-in effect, like Cassandra Cain Batgirl, you could really make some cool combos with it. The problem, and basic attacks do 100% more basic damage than the opponent's snare. The problem with Hawkgirl is not the passive now. The problem with Hawkgirl is the stats. I think it's like 950 damage, 900 health, or something retardedly low. If you make the stats 1200, Hawkgirl would see a lot more play than she does now. So I think the card definitely needs a buff. And her sister, Regime Hawkgirl, had a really cool passive. Unfortunately, when it gets blocked, it means absolutely nothing, because when Hawkgirl tags in, she disables all opponent specials. So you can disable specials and tagging out if you use both Hawkgirls. If she gets 200% of special 2, it will become a critical hit. The problem is if it gets blocked, it does not crit. You cannot get blocked crits. So, Hawkgirl, really bad card in my opinion, definitely needs a buff. Killer Frost, leave her the way she is. I think she's fine. The fact that she's a weak card with a broken, busted passive just shows enough how powerful this card is. If you face this card in multiplayer, you can tell that you don't even need high stats on Killer Frost. You just need to load up on special 2 damage. You can even use 2-piece LexCorp with her personal gear item, and basically every time she Black Ice, she's going to heal a shitload. So, that's all there is to it. Now, one card that I could see use a buff. Before patch 2.6, when augments and 4th World Gear came into play, nobody used the regular Killer Frost, or if they did, they used both Killer Frost with Shazam. However, Blackest Night Martian Manhunter broke the health threshold at 1400. Nobody played Shazam anymore, and nobody played Regime Killer Frost because it did nothing to 4th World Regen. So I think if they ever made a card that did nerf regens, you might even see a resurgence of this card along with that card, and I'm really surprised that they have not put in a passive that nerfs regens by 90%, because once you see that, that'll completely shut down Fourth World, and you'll probably be facing it in defense quite a lot. So upon special attack activation, opponent's power generation and speed are reduced by 50%. And Killer Frost can still do that with her Cold as Ice as well. So, pretty busted there.
Lex Luthor.
Now, Crypto Lex Luthor does have a pretty cool effect. Lex Luthor and his teammates have a 30% increase to their maximum health. And if anybody has played single player before, 30% health, even 15% health from Red Sun, Solomon Grundy makes a huge difference. So, health buffs are really powerful, especially if your Crypto Lex Luthor is not your main character. You can just use it kind of on the sidelines, and it's good enough. So, what Lex Luthor needs is either faster attacks, or he needs more damage, because he definitely does not have damage. Lex Luthors have always been known for defensive cards, and Lex Luthor Bronze, you see me using in Nightmare a lot because of the 15% increased damage, and even if you don't have Batman or animated Harley Quinn, a 15% damage buff on your main gold card can be really powerful. So, you know, the cards are fine. The passives are great. I just think that Gold Lex Luthor could use either more damage or a better light or heavy attack. The card is just too slow to actually be useful.
Lobo.
And Lobo also suffers from that. He's just too slow, and the stat line is horrible. I think he's like 850 damage, 1,000 health, or something ridiculously low. And that's why, obviously, you see, I don't give a shit about Lobo. I think the card sucks.
Lobo.
Bounty Hunter Lobo also suffers from the same problem. If anybody else had what Lobo has, like if you threw it on a Batman, 1,250 damage and 900 health would be acceptable. But because it's on Lobo, the card is horrible. Now the passive is kind of cool because when Lobo performs a special 2, the enemy cannot take out until the fire dot runs its course. Every successful special 2 makes the next special 2 damage and dot length go up by 20%. Again, if this passive was on anybody but Lobo, it would actually be good. A lot of people thought that Bounty Hunter Lobo was broken. That turned out to be far from the truth because Lobo is a ridiculously slow card. So that card sucks. Now, Martian Manhunter, in my opinion, is one of the funnest cards in the game because Martian Manhunter's basic combo has a chance of triggering a telepathic attack, which causes random effects on his opponent. While Martian Manhunter is a slow card, if you can trigger a stun, Cloak of Destiny can just destroy people. Your Phase Assaults do like a ridiculous amount of damage when he's augmented. So, Martian Manhunter is one of those underrated cards. I wish he had more than 750 damage. Like, I think even if he had 1,000 or 1,100 damage, the card would see play this day because that's just a cool mechanic. Great design of a card, bad damage. I think his health is fine the way it is. 1,250 health is actually really good. But he could definitely use a damage buff. Blackest Night Martian Manhunter, obviously one of the best defensive cards in the game. He's fine the way he is, especially with the buff to Blackest Night Batman. Now, New 52 Nightwing does have a kind of cool design. Nightwing's base attacks deal 100% more damage for 3 seconds. The problem is the card's been out since patch 2.0, and even on patch 2.0, the card was understated compared to Arkham Origins, Batman, Red Sun, Superman, and the like, and he saw no play. So, something needs to be done about New 52 Nightwing. Even if they change his passive to be like a permanent 100% basic damage boost, I think he'd see a lot of play. So, why is it only 3 seconds? Why couldn't it be like 30 seconds or a minute? That extra 100% to basic damage would actually make the card usable because Nightwing is one of the few cards that have a power drain in special. One is Lone Bird does do pretty good damage. So, I think what they need to do for New 52 Nightwing is they either need to buff his stats by about 200, or they need to change his passive to 30 seconds and make him much more of a threat. Now, as we know, Raven is one of those cards that can be overpowered or can be considered an easy counter, because when you're doing the heavy attack combo, or even the light attack combo, the third hit, you automatically can, like, if you're getting hit, you can hit your special button. And, for example, Red Sun Superman with his Flying Punch, Arkham Knight Batman with his Arkham Assault, high damage single hit moves, even the Rage Slam from Luchador Bane can just overwhelm Raven, and she's not going to be able to swap her health. So a lot of people have figured out how to deal with Raven. But I think the card is still fine the way it is. In Survivor mode, Raven is the best, hands down, card in the game. While Killer Frost can dampen the power, nothing allows you to do better than Raven. Now, unfortunately, Regime Raven, once per match when Raven is below 40% health, her basic attacks drain power from the opponent for 8 seconds. Why is this a temporary effect? Why isn't it a permanent effect? Now, I think the passive should read, when Raven is below 40% health, her basic attacks drain power from the opponent and cannot give the opponent power. I think that's how the passive should read. And the problem with Raven, again, lies in stats. It's like 950 damage, 900 health. The card wasn't even playable before patch 2.0 because the card was too slow. And nowadays, the card sees no play whatsoever. So, really bad card. Now, who remembers when Mortal Kombat Scorpion used to be 800 damage and 700, or 800 damage, 850 health? The card was unplayable then. They buffed the damage to 950. The problem is, the card needs more than that. I think if the card had 1200 damage, or even 1300 damage, you could accept the health the way it is, have it be an offensive card. And specials inflict fire damage over 6 seconds. This is fine. I think the swiping combo needs to be buffed a little bit to actually be a little bit more threatening. I think if you triple the damage, it might see some play. And the fire damage really doesn't do much. Obviously, the Hellfire is a really powerful mechanic. So I think Scorpion needs yet another buff to be in line.
Scorpion.
Mortal Kombat X Scorpion, unfortunately, does not have the speed that Mortal Kombat Scorpion has. So because of that, the card sucks. Now, fun fact, before augments actually worked in 2.7, this was the only card in the game that could actually crit from dots. So Mortal Kombat X Scorpion back in the day was actually useful. It was really hard to get to 200% on flip kick. The Doom Slice you had to aim. But when you got a crit on the Ibis-Stick, oh my god, it was ridiculous. So it did see some play before they actually fixed the augments because of the Doom Slice critting. So it's a pretty cool card. I really think they need to relook at the attacks, not be so slow. Because that's really all you got to change on Mortal Kombat X Scorpion. He got a huge buff compared to Mortal Kombat Scorpion, but unfortunately it was just not enough.
Shazam.
Now, the only thing you need to change about Shazam is he's got 950 damage, 1350 health. The card was obviously the best defensive card in the game before Blackest Night Martian Manhunter came into play in patch 2.6. So how do you change that? You either put him at the same amount of damage and 1700 health, or you put his damage at like 1200 and you can buff the health to like 1500. And I can guarantee Shazam would be available. Now, the reason that Shazam doesn't see a whole lot of play these days is the simple fact that there's cards that are just a lot more efficient. Arkham Knight Batman usually does an Arkham Assault or a super move right at the beginning. Like, I don't know why they changed Arkham Origins Batman, because if Arkham Knight Batman can do it with Batgirl or Ra's al Ghul Scimitar, why can't Arkham Origins Batman do it? I think it's just silly. So, this passive is really cool. It's what allows you to actually do really well in Survivor if you know how to use it. Unfortunately, I don't have 7 Shazams. One of these days, I will work on that. But I think that Shazam either needs more health to make him the defensive menace that he was, considering he is a premium super rare card, and in this day and age, you don't need him. You have Injustice 2 Superman, Arkham Knight Batman, Killer Frost, and I guarantee you're going to win 99% of your matchups if they're augmented.
Sinestro.
Now, Antimatter Sinestro, unfortunately, is a super slow card. The saving grace was the Fear Me ability working with 3-piece League of Assassins, and I am really glad to see the League of Assassins 3-piece, or even 2-piece get nerfed into the ground, because I never liked going up against it, so I never liked using it. Well, League of Assassins Adept Knives is still one of the best gear ends in the game, especially when you pair it with the Ibis-Stick, because the Ibis-Stick will cause your League of Assassins Adept Knives to do an additional 30% damage on your special one, flexible special 2, and give you that burn damage, which is why you see me use that along with the Bone Spikes or the Knife Collection on Red Sun Superman. That's good enough.
Sinestro.
Green Lantern Sinestro, unfortunately, if he tags out, loses the Ring Overcharge buff. But the card, again, Sinestro is a really slow card, and that's why he's a garbage card. And he also needs a lot more stats. I think 1300 would be good enough. Zero Compassion is pretty good, so you can at least use him off the tag, but otherwise, garbage card. Please buff his speed. Boss Solomon Grundy at 550 damage. At one time, he did break the health meta. I think he had 1250 health, whereas Darkseid and Red Sun Green Lantern had 1200. I think Darkseid had 1100 or something like that, 1050, but Red Sun Green Lantern had 1200 health. This guy actually broke the health meta at 1250, but at 550 damage, and the fact that this passive is on Solomon Grundy makes this so bad, because if you threw this passive on Batman, it would be batshit crazy, even if he had 550 damage, because Batman is one of the fastest basic attackers in the game. The only thing to really trump that is Metahuman the Flash when he has his speed buff. So Red Sun Solomon Grundy, again, needs a buff. I think he has like 800 damage, 850 health, or something stupid low. Now, Red Sun Solomon Grundy actually was used in the Red Sun team before Green Lantern came into play, because 45% health on Red Sun, Superman, and Wonder Woman was really strong. Nobody used Deathstroke because while he had 950 damage, he had like 850 health, so he wasn't playable. He didn't have enough health. And then when you use Solomon Grundy, he's just too weak. You can't use Deathstroke with anybody on the Red Sun team. So, Red Sun Solomon Grundy, the health buff is really cool. I just think that Solomon Grundy, again, just needs faster attacks in general, and I think he'd be okay the way he is. Static was an amazing card at 1050, of course, until patch 2.6, when Static got replaced by Blackest Night Martian Manhunter. Static, however, is a really cool card because immune to power drain, successfully blocking special attacks generates power for Static. I have not tested this with the Scarecrow mask and the two-piece LexCorp. I really want to do a video on that, but unfortunately I only have 2 promotions for Static. But I would love to see the reflect mechanics and blocking just generate like a whole bar or 2 bars on Arkham Knight or Batman. I think that would be hilarious. And I think that would make the Scarecrow mask, which I actually think is a pretty good gear item, because reflecting specials is really powerful in multiplayer. And also, it damages the opponent. So even if you don't use any other blocking gear, you reflect a ton of damage back at the opponent. 40% of the damage goes to the opponent. You take 60% damage. If you use that on Red Sun Green Lantern or Suicide Squad the Joker, you only take 40% damage and the opponent takes 40%. So I think all Static really needs is about 200 more damage and health, and he'd be the menace that he used to be. Superman, considering he's a card you can buy for credits, I think is fine the way he is. I think his Freeze Breath is a little bit weak. But other than that, it's not a bad card. I was using it quite a bit on my Android account. I think he's fine, considering you can buy him for credits. Dawn of Justice Superman, I think, should permanently shatter all gear when the special is not blocked, and he would be fine. That's good enough. Godfall Superman, unfortunately, suffers from the problem that on successful block, Superman reflects all basic damage. The only way you can actually make this useful is if you're running two-piece LexCorp, and you're running the Fourth World chest plate, which can actually deflect basic attacks, because the deflect mechanic will also generate power. So, to use Godfall Superman properly, you have to have the LexCorp helmet chest plate, and you have to use the Fourth World chest plate, or it's just not good enough. You'll just get destroyed. You obviously have to have Killer Frost on your team. It's a really good card. It is a direct upgrade to Red Sun Superman, as I think he has like 50 or 100 more damage and health. But, I don't know, it just, the way the passive works, it's not good enough, because if you want to reflect damage on the opponent, you can't use blocking gear. And if you're blocking basic attacks all day long, you're just not going to do anything. So, I think they could have redesigned it. Injustice 2 Superman, obviously we know, is broken as hell, really powerful. Superman. If you don't have the card, you should have bought it. Now, this is one thing that really annoyed me about Man of Steel Superman, considering they nerf power generation. How hard would it be, especially when he has 800 damage, 1200 health, just let him use super moves like back in the day when the card first came out? When you could actually combo multiple super moves with Man of Steel Superman, the card was fun as hell. Why not bring that mechanic back? If you're not going to bring that mechanic back, at least give him 300 more damage so the card is usable. Prison Superman, I think, is fine the way he is, because you can get him for completing the story mode. And he's only 133,000 credits. He's cheaper than most gold cards, so I'll leave Prison Superman alone. His passive is really fun. If it was on a card that actually had decent stats, it would be broken as hell. Red Sun Superman may seem kind of weak at 1,000 damage, 1,100 health, but let me assure you, when you're with the Red Sun, Green Lantern, and Wonder Woman, he does just fine. I think the card is fine the way he is, especially because you can get him out of gold booster packs still. Now, Regime Superman did undergo many nerfs.
Superman.
The Heat Vision used to do double the damage that it did, and it was considered broken. Back when they had the 50% off sale, I think a year or two ago, it was like 110,000 credits. This was a steal to buy because he had the same damage as Red Sun Superman, I believe. Maybe 500 less. I think he was 950 damage. And he had 1,000 health, so it was respectable. The Heat Vision used to do double the damage. And once per match, when Superman is at 40% health or less, he does 50% increased damage for 6 seconds. So you could purposely wait till you were under that threshold, use a Heat Vision, and basically eliminate anybody, especially with augments. So it was considered broken and overpowered. Now, Arkham Knight, the Arkham Knight, achieving 180% on the Gotham Knight special attack, calls in a drone strike, dealing damage to the entire enemy team. Why couldn't that be worked into the passive and actually get a passive where if you do a light attack, he restores that much health? I think that would be fine. Or light combos do 20% more damage. Arkham Knight, the Arkham Knight, can already do crazy damage, and he was the first card introduced in the game with a 3-hit light combo, and the other one being Dawn of Justice Wonder Woman. So, Elseworld the Flash, the challenge was done once. You can get him out of most wanted packs, which used to piss people off. Why is the card 750, 750 is my knowledge. I think the card should be around 1,100, 1,100, and maybe it would start seeing some play. Passive is kind of cool. Once per match, when Flash reaches 30% health, his opponent's specials are disabled, and time slows for 7 seconds. Passive is really cool. Now, I think to buff the passive, I think it should actually trigger up to 3 times, kind of like Reverse Flash, but you have to get over the 30% threshold, which means you have to heal. I think that would make the passive really cool and really powerful. Now, Metahuman the Flash, as we know, 1,200, 1,200. The card is fine the way it is. It's a good, solid card. Leave the card alone. It's fine.
The Joker.
Arkham Origins, the Joker, was the last good Joker to have the 4-hit swipe heavy attack. Unfortunately, neither of the Suicide Squad characters have that cool swipe, and that's really unfortunate because now Suicide Squad, the Joker, goes from a decent basic damage dealer, which would be insane for a Joker with 1,300 damage to have the 4-hit heavy attack, which used to be amazing, gets this garbage-ass 2-hit heavy attack that doesn't even do 150% damage. So, unfortunately, because of that, Suicide Squad the Joker is relegated to special damage, which is why I throw the League of Assassins, Adept Knights, Imbistick, and Enchantress gear on the Joker because it's annoying as hell, and that's how I was able to win over 60% of my matches. So, Arkham Origins, the Joker, special attacks inflict poison gas. The damage from the poison multiplies with every Arkham teammate. This passive is really cool. The problem with Arkham Origins, the Joker, is he could use about 200 more stats, and I think he'd be pretty competitive. Insurgency, the Joker, I think has like 800 damage, 750 health. It's really bad. That's why I never finished promoting him back in the day. I had 3 promotions. I actually needed him back in the day to complete because it was just too hard without it. So, if the Joker is knocked out, his opponent loses health. That in itself can be really powerful if you can combo with something else. For example, a super move to finish somebody off. The Last Laugh and the Laughing Gas used to knock out opponents. As of patch 2.10, it does not, and I really wish it did. So, how do you buff Insurgency of the Joker? Well, consider that you can buy the card for credits. Do you really need to buff it? No. Now, Killing Joke Joker was introduced with the Alliance credits. You needed 60 Alliance credits per promotion for the Killing Joke Joker. Now, back in the day, he used to have, I think it's 950 damage. How do I look at it? 950 damage, 750 health.
The Joker.
Back in the day, that was actually really acceptable because the highest damage was 1,000. Well, now the highest damage is 1,400. 950 doesn't cut it. He still has a really cool passive. If the Joker is knocked out, his teammate's power is charged to full. Unfortunately, this works against Arkham Knight Harley Quinn, who just does it anyways. So, It's really unfortunate. I really think that if Arkham Knight Harley Quinn is on the team and the Joker gets knocked out, I think she should gain like 100% damage or something crazy. But the way it is now, it kind of sucks. In Suicide Squad, the Joker unhinged. Just like Suicide Squad, the Joker has that crappy-ass heavy attack that needs to get changed back to the one it was. If it was unhinged, would probably see a lot more play. But because of that, I like Suicide Squad, the Joker. That's a really good passive. It's also really good with Killer Croc's gear item if you're looking for tanky stuff. And you could use 2-piece LexCorp, Killer Croc's gear item, and yeah, now he becomes a pretty good tank. 600 Wonder Woman in today's age does have really bad stats, but because of her really strong passive, which all female characters on Wonder Woman's team receive 30% damage and power generation, it's acceptable to have a card this bad of stats because you complement your other cards. If you use this on Teen Titans Raven, for example, or even Arkham Knight Catwoman, now her stuff just becomes ridiculous. I think the card is fine the way it is. Now, Dawn of Justice Wonder Woman, unfortunately, I'm really disappointed with the way this passive works because Wonder Woman's special attacks trigger team health gain, which provides 50% of the special attack's damage and healing. Unfortunately, if the special move is blocked, you only get one heal, and it's whatever is blocked. So if you use a shield toss against somebody with a LexCorp helmet, you're going to heal for like 500 damage. How useful is that? So, unfortunately, that mechanic is really bad. You could use Dawn of Justice Wonder Woman, however, as an offensive card. Even though it's statted defensively at 1100 damage, 1400 health, you could still use the Ra's al Ghul Scimitar with the Knife Collection and a damage item that crits, and it would be acceptable. You could even use it with the Gauntlets of Azrael, and you get your well-needed healing back. With 3 hits, you're going to do a lot of damage. So you can use Dawn of Justice Wonder Woman with the Ra's al Ghul Scimitar, the Gauntlets of Azrael, and a basic damage gear and the crits, and it's pretty good. Now, Justice League Wonder Woman is the last Wonder Woman to have the single-hit shield toss. And I really think she has a cool passive. I think she's fine the way she was. She was the first card in the game that had 1300 damage. The next one to follow that was Dawn of Justice Superman. So when Wonder Woman activates a special attack or super move, Justice League teammates receive power. And I think it's either half a bar of power or half of the special power that you use. So obviously this would benefit having a lot of power generation on Justice League Wonder Woman, because then you can give a lot of power to your teammates, especially if you're running Superman, Batman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, Cyborg, and Wonder Woman. And newsflash, 2 of the cards on that list are broken and overpowered, and you should always use them. That would be Injustice 2 Superman and Arkham Knight Batman, or Dawn of Justice Batman. Either card is good, so yeah, Justice League Wonder Woman is fine the way she is. Red Sun Wonder Woman also has one of the best passives in the game, because Wonder Woman and her team gain 15% power generation for each Red Sun character on her team. So if you're running Green Lantern Superman, 45% power generation, then you're running the Ibistic, and you're running the League of Assassins Death Knights, which is 30% power generation, and you're running the Ibistic, which is 20% power generation, so you still gain 45% power generation, even if you're running against Killer Frost. That's huge. So because of that fact, I think Red Sun Wonder Woman is fine the way she is, especially because you can get her out of gold booster packs if you try hard enough. Now, Regime Wonder Woman did undergo a nerf. Those of you guys that remember before patch 2.0, Shield of the Gods actually generated a ridiculous amount of power. If you threw power generation gear on Regime Wonder Woman, you could literally block 8 times and get a full bar to do a super move. That was absolutely busted. And NetherRealm saw that in patch 2.0 with 7 promotions, and they quickly went to the nerf hammer. Unfortunately, with the way the passive is, 750 damage and 1050 health just does not cut it. So, how do you fix Regime Wonder Woman? Well, you really can't, considering Justice League Wonder Woman has 1300 damage and 1100 health. Dawn of Justice Wonder Woman has 1100 damage, 1400 health. You could probably put it at 1200 to have a little bit of variety, but I still think there's better options out there. Considering that you could buy this card with credits, well, it's probably way too late in the game cycle for that. But if they ever do release a card like this in Injustice 2, don't have it be a weak card. Have it with respectable damage. And of course, Zod has a really cool passive. For every teammate that is knocked out, General Zod receives 20% bonus to all damage and 20% bonus to health. So, while it looks like he has 800 damage, 1200 health, he actually gets like 1200 damage, and the bonus to health is not actually maximum health, you just heal 20% health. But the extra damage, if this was on a card that actually had a fast attack, would be insane, but because it's Zod, who's a slower attacker, basically sees almost no play. But it is a cool card. I think that if it had the effect kind of like Blackest Night Hawkgirl, it'd be a little bit more useful, because then that could be upwards of 80% damage if he's the only one around. So there's a couple ways to fix this card, but I think the first one would be buff it to 1100 damage and have the passive work on the enemy as well, so you can get up to 80% damage, and then it would be kind of like BShornock level. But that's basically it for all the cards. I know I talked for like 50 minutes, and this video is probably a lot longer than necessary, but if you like this video talking about cards that need to be buffed, please give this video a like rating, comment, subscribe, share this video amongst your friends, and as a favorite, check out my other Injustice Gods Among Us videos playlist, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, which are all HollywoodShono, and have a wonderful day, kids.
www.youtube.com/HollywoodShono. Subscribe, bitches!